Well, a deal has been reached to keep workers at 17 Ontario no-frills grocery stores on the job. But that hasn't been much of the trend in 2023. This is a year that we have seen the most work days lost to labour strife in a decade. The Liberals have introduced legislation that would make it illegal for federal employers to bring in replacement workers to fill the job of striking workers. So let's bring into this discussion Stephen Tufts. He's a professor at York University who studies organized labor and labor geography. Great to have you in studio. Welcome
Thanks
back.
for having me.
All right, well, obviously unions and labor advocacy groups are happy with this, but where does the legislation go not far enough, in your opinion?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, is that this only covers about 2% of Canadian workers. Because it's some federal regulated employees who are unionized. Where it doesn't go far enough is it doesn't let workers respect picket lines. That wasn't included in legislation.
What does that mean?
It means that if unionized workers want to respect another federal workers' right to strike and not cross a picket line to perform their job, they still have to do that, or they can be disciplined. The other thing that I think is really important is that back-to-work legislation is still in the back pocket of the employers and the government.
Yeah.
And they'll do that for industries such as air travel.
Whenever we get to the point of having labor demonstrations, it's because negotiations have not done well. So where would this legislation affect negotiations?
Well, I think that this is a leveling type of legislation. It gives a little bit more power to unions, and it forces employers to bargain efficiently and quickly. If they know that they cannot bring in replacement workers, they have to reach a deal at the table. They no longer have that option at the federal level.
So the bill also sets out new process for determining what's called a maintenance of activities agreement. And that's essentially means deciding on which operations continue in the event of a strike. Those now have to be set out almost 2 weeks ahead of a strike. And if there is no agreement, it is set to the Industrial Relations Board. They have to decide within 90 days. That seems like a lot of stop and starts.
It is a process, but in some cases it is necessary to keep some minimal level of service going at the federal level for public health and safety reasons.
Sure.
But this can also be negotiated well ahead of time of a strike. That 2 week is when it has to be submitted. But workers, their unions and employers can start working on the maintenance activities agreements now. There's nothing stopping them.
Okay. There is a clause that states that this bill won't go into effect until 18 months after it receives royal assent. So Labour Minister Seamus O'Regan says this is to give employers a chance to adapt to the new laws, set up some new policies, but it's also worth noting that there is also an election happening 23 months from now. See, you're laughing. So how much do you think the desire to build good political will factors into the introduction of this bill?
Well, we have to go back to the roots of this bill. This bill was part of the supply and confidence motion. So it's a deal with the NDP to keep the Liberals in power. This is what they got in exchange because unions have always wanted anti-replacement worker or anti-scab legislation in place. However, this 18 months after royal assent will take us almost right up to the next election. And
is that typical, by the way, or is that special to this?
This, I think, is special to this. This is a little bit suspect. There's no reason I think it takes 18 months to implement this legislation or get up to speed. It's not that complicated. What it does allow is for lobbyists to try to change the bill. It does allow for it to only be in place for a few months. If Pierre Poilievre takes power, he'll likely repeal it. We had anti-scab legislation in Ontario way back when, under the Bob Rae government. It was one of the first laws that was repealed when Mike Harris took power. And Ontario doesn't have anti-scab legislation to this day. Quebec and BC do. And I think that's for employers that are real worry about this legislation, is that it's a sample. It gives an opportunity to demonstrate that it can work, that it won't create an increase in strikes, and that maybe the next provincial government in Ontario might also adopt similar legislation as well.
So that's what you're most closely watching for all of this?
That's what I'm watching.
All right, Stephen, great to have you in today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
And say good morning to your mom.
I will.
Who's watching today.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.